I'm Rosie, 34 female. I live in a small but cozy apartment in the city, filled with books on historical buildings and blueprints I've collected over the years. As an architectural historian, my life revolves around preserving the integrity of the past, a passion I inherited directly from my father, George. He was the one who taught me that a strong foundation is everything, not just in buildings, but in life. I thought our family had the strongest foundation of all, until the day my stepmother tried to bulldoze it to the ground with a single, forged piece of paper. This is the story of how a video message my dad recorded from beyond the grave gave me the blueprint to take back his legacy. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My dad, George, was a man of precision and logic. As a civil engineer, he spent 40 years designing bridges and public works, structures built to withstand the tests of time and pressure. He applied that same meticulousness to everything in his life, from the way he organized his workshop to the way he raised me. After my mom passed away when I was 12, it was just the two of us. He was both my father and my mother, my mentor, and my biggest supporter. He taught me how to read blueprints, how to understand the language of structures, and most importantly, how to see the history and humanity locked within old buildings. Our home was a testament to his character, a sturdy, early 20th century craftsman that he'd lovingly restored himself. Every beam was sound, every joint perfect. He used to say, "A house isn't just wood and nails, Rosie. It's a repository of memories. It has to be built to last." That was our life, built to last. When Dad was 65, 5 years after he retired, he met Brenda. She was a real estate agent, 10 years younger, with a bright, flashy smile and a laugh that seemed to fill every room. At first, I was happy for him. He'd been alone for so long, and Brenda brought a whirlwind of energy into his quiet, ordered life. She redecorated parts of the house in loud colors I knew he secretly disliked, and she filled his social calendar with dinner parties and community events he'd always avoided. He seemed happy, though, and that was all that mattered to me. They married a year after they met. I tried hard to like her, for his sake. I complimented her questionable design choices and listened to her endless stories about closing big sales. But there was always something about her that felt superficial. Her affection for my father seemed performative, her interest in his life's work feigned. He loved showing people the intricate models of bridges he'd built, explaining the physics with a quiet passion in his eyes. Brenda would just pat his arm and say, "Oh, George, you and your little toys," and then steer the conversation back to herself. My best friend Liam saw it too. Liam and I had been friends since college, and he was as much a part of our family as anyone. He was a tech consultant, the complete opposite of my dad in profession, but they shared a mutual respect for a well-designed system, be it a bridge or a piece of software. "I don't trust her," Liam told me in confidence one evening after a family dinner. "The way she looks at your dad's things, it's like she's appraising them, not admiring them." I brushed it off as him being overprotective, but a seed of doubt was planted. Despite my reservations, the next few years were peaceful. Dad's health was good, and he and Brenda seemed to have settled into a comfortable routine. He was slowing down, of course, but his mind was as sharp as ever. Dee spent hours in his office, a sanctuary filled with books, drafting tables, and his old computer, discussing my work or looking over his old project files. Brenda rarely ventured in there. She called it the Dusty Museum. During these years, Dad made it very clear what his final wishes were. His will, drafted by his longtime family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, was simple and straightforward. The house, his pride and joy, would go to me, along with his personal effects and a significant portion of his retirement savings. Brenda would be well taken care of, receiving the condo they had purchased in Florida for winter getaways, her own car, and a generous lifelong annuity from his pension that would allow her to live very comfortably. "It's all about fairness, Rosie," he told me one afternoon, his hand resting on a thick legal document on his desk. Your mother and I built this life, this home. I want you to have it. It's your foundation. Brenda has been a good companion and she will want for nothing. This is the right way. It's all laid out, clear as a bell. I trusted him completely. My father was not a man who left things to chance. His plans, like his bridges, were designed to be unshakable. I had no reason to believe anything could ever threaten that foundation. I was wrong. My father's decline was sudden. One day he was in his workshop, helping me figure out the structural history of a building I was researching. A few weeks later, he was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. The last 6 months of his life were a blur of hospital visits, hushed conversations with doctors, and a desperate attempt to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Throughout it all, Brenda played the part of the devoted, grieving wife. She was always at his side, fluffing his pillows, speaking to the nurses, and managing the endless stream of well-wishers. To an outsider, she was a saint, but I saw things others didn't. I saw the flash of irritation in her eyes when he needed help in the middle of the night. I heard the impatience in her voice when he was too weak to eat. She would post long, emotional updates on social media about her brave husband, earning hundreds of sympathy comments. But in the quiet moments in the hospital room, she was often on her phone, scrolling through real estate listings. I spent every moment I could with him. We didn't talk much about the end. Instead, he wanted to hear about my work, about Liam, about my life. He wanted to reminisce about my mom, about our summer trips, about the time he taught me how to use a drafting compass. It was as if he was reinforcing the foundation of my memories, ensuring they would stand long after he was gone. A week before he passed, he had a moment of startling clarity. Brenda had gone to get coffee, and it was just the two of us. He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Rosie," he whispered, his voice raspy, "don't let anyone ever tell you what I wanted. You know, you've always known." His eyes were intense, trying to convey a message deeper than his words. "The blueprint is clear." Before I could ask what he meant, Brenda returned and the moment was lost. I thought he was just speaking metaphorically about his wishes for my life. I didn't realize he was giving me a literal warning. He passed away peacefully in his sleep. The grief was immense, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. The funeral was a haze. Brenda was the picture of a heartbroken widow, dressed in black, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. She accepted condolences with a practiced grace that made my stomach turn. A week after the funeral, Mr. Harrison called to arrange the reading of the will. The meeting took place in his formal, wood-paneled office. I sat on one side of the large mahogany desk, with Liam beside me for support. Brenda sat on the other side, looking somber. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, his expression grave. "As you know, I have been George's lawyer for over 30 years. I have his last will and testament here, which we drafted together 5 years ago." He started to open the sealed envelope, but Brenda held up a hand. "Actually, Arthur," she said, her voice smooth as glass, "that one is no longer valid." Mr. Harrison froze, his hand hovering over the document. "I'm sorry." Brenda reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a different envelope. She slid it across the desk. "George made some changes recently. This is his new will, his final testament. He had it drawn up and signed just 2 weeks before he passed." My blood ran cold. 2 weeks before he died, he was heavily medicated and barely lucid most of the time. There was no way he could have made such a decision. Mr. Harrison looked stunned. He took the document and examined it. It looked official. The signature at the bottom looked like my father's, though a bit shakier than I remembered. It was witnessed by 2 names I didn't recognize. According to this new document, everything, the house, the savings, the investments, the personal effects, was left to his beloved wife, Brenda. I was mentioned only once, in a single, brutal sentence. "To my daughter, Rosie, I leave my love and hope she finds her own way in the world." I felt the air leave my lungs. Liam put a hand on my arm, his grip firm. "That's impossible," I stammered. "He would never. We spoke about his will. He was adamant." Brenda gave me a look of pity, a look that was more insulting than any anger could have been. Grief can make us misremember things, dear. George and I had many long talks in those final weeks. He realized that I was the one who was there for him, taking care of him. He wanted to make sure I was secure. He knew you were independent and could take care of yourself. Secure, I shot back, my voice rising. The original will left you more than secure. This is a complete betrayal of everything he ever told me. Mr. Harrison looked deeply troubled. Brenda, this is highly irregular. For George to make such a drastic change without consulting me and with his health in such a state. Are you questioning its validity? Brenda asked, her voice hardening. It's signed, dated, and witnessed. It's a legally binding document. George was of sound mind when he signed it. His nurse and one of the orderlies were there. They can attest to it. The room was silent. The document felt like a judgment, a final, inexplicable rejection from the man who had been my rock. I looked at the signature again. It was close, so close to his, but something was off. It was like a tracing of his handwriting, lacking the confident flow he always had. I knew my father. I knew his love for precision, for order. This was chaos. This was a lie. The foundation he had so carefully built for me had just been shattered, and I had no idea how to even begin picking up the pieces. The days following the will reading were the darkest of my life. Brenda, acting with chilling speed, had her lawyer file the new will with the probate court. She gave me a 30-day notice to vacate the house, my childhood home. She spoke to me with a cloying sweetness that was more menacing than any threat, telling me she needed to prepare the property for sale and that she was sure I'd understand. Every word was a twist of the knife. I was losing my father all over again, and this time, it felt like he was being erased. I spent my days and a days, mechanically packing my life into boxes. Liam was my lifeline. He came over every evening, bringing food I didn't eat and a quiet strength that kept me from completely falling apart. He was as convinced as I was that the will was a fake, but we had no proof. Mr. Harrison was looking into the witnesses, but he warned me it would be an uphill battle. Forgery is incredibly difficult to prove, especially when the person whose signature it is can no longer testify. My task was to clear out my father's office. Brenda hadn't dared to touch the dusty museum, telling me to take whatever personal trinkets I wanted before she hired a company to dispose of the rest. The thought of strangers throwing away my father's life's work was sickening. The office was exactly as he'd left it. His reading glasses were on a stack of books, a half-finished cup of tea sat on his desk, and the air still smelled faintly of old paper and his pipe tobacco. It was a time capsule of the man I loved, and packing it felt like a final, brutal goodbye. For 2 days, I sorted through books, blueprints, and project files, carefully wrapping his bridge models and categorizing his research notes. Each item held a memory, and the grief was so overwhelming I could barely function. On the 3rd day, I tackled his desk. It was an old, massive oak desk with a dozen small drawers, each filled with pens, paper clips, and engineering tools. In the back of the bottom drawer, tucked away beneath a stack of old schematics, was his tablet. It was an older model he used for reading news articles and watching documentaries. I'd forgotten all about it. I assumed the battery was dead, but on a whim, I plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, showing his favorite screensaver, a picture of my mom and me when I was a little girl. I swiped it open. He never bothered with a password. His home screen was simple, a few news apps, a weather widget, and the standard camera and photo gallery icons. I opened the gallery, hoping to find a few more pictures of him. I scrolled through photos of his bridges, pictures from family vacations, and a few selfies he'd clumsily taken with Brenda where he looked more pained than happy. And then I saw it. The very last item in the gallery was a video. The thumbnail was a close-up of his face. He looked tired and pale, but his eyes were clear and focused. He was in his favorite armchair in the living room, a place he rarely sat in his final weeks. I looked at the file details. The date stamp was exactly 1 week before he died, the day he had grabbed my hand and told me, "The blueprint is clear." My heart started pounding in my chest. With a trembling finger, I pressed play. His face filled the screen. He took a deep, raspy breath. "Rosie," he began, his voice weak but steady. "If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone. And it probably means that Brenda has tried to pull something. I'm sorry I have to do it this way, but I haven't felt safe making my plans known." He paused, glancing nervously over his shoulder as if expecting someone to walk in. "Over the last few months, I've seen a side of Brenda I wish I'd never had to. She's been pressuring me, talking about money, about changing the will. She thinks I'm confused, that the medication has muddled my mind. But there are moments of clarity, Rosie. This is one of them." Tears were streaming down my face, but I didn't make a sound. "I would never ever write you out of my will," he said, his voice firm, filled with the old authority I knew so well. "The house is yours. My legacy is yours. That has always been the plan. The will Mr. Harrison has is my true and final will. Anything else she might produce is a lie. A fraud." "Haiti." Ook another breath. "She brought a document to me yesterday, a new will. She had 2 people with her, a nurse I've never liked and an orderly. She tried to get me to sign it, telling me it was just a formality for my medical care. I refused. I told her to leave. She became angry. I'm afraid of what she might do, Rosie. I don't think she would hurt me, but she is desperate. She might try to forge my signature or find some other way." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes boring into mine. "So, this is my insurance policy. This video is my testimony. The tablet's internal clock is accurate. The file is time-stamped. This is me, George Miller, on this date, of sound mind and body, well, sound mind, anyway, stating unequivocally my last wishes. Don't let her take our home, Rosie. Don't let her erase what your mother and I built." He coughed, a racking sound that shook his frail frame. "I love you more than words can say. Be strong. You know what to do. The blueprint is clear." The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence of his office, the tablet clutched in my hands. It felt like my father had just reached out from the grave and handed me a weapon. The grief was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, a cold, hard resolve. Brenda thought she had won. She thought my father was silenced forever, but she had underestimated him. My father, the brilliant engineer, had built one last, perfect structure, a failsafe. And he had just given me the blueprint to bring Brenda's entire house of cards crashing down. The moment the video ended, I called Liam. My voice was shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. "I have it," I whispered. "I have the proof. Dad left a message." 15 minutes later, he was at the house. We watched the video together in the dim light of the office. When it was over, Liam just looked at me, his eyes wide. "Rosie, this is it. This is everything. This is a digital declaration. It's time-stamped, it's him, it's irrefutable." His logical, tech-focused mind immediately kicked into gear. "First things first," he said, pulling out his laptop. "We need to secure this file. We're making multiple backups, cloud, external hard drive, my personal server. We are not losing this." While he worked, meticulously creating copies and documenting the original file's metadata, my own mind started to clear. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a surge of purpose. My father's last words, "You know what to do," echoed in my head. He was right. I was an architectural historian. My entire career was built on investigation, on following paper trails, on piecing together the truth from fragmented evidence. Brenda had created a fraudulent document. Now I would deconstruct it piece by piece. The next morning, I went to see Mr. Harrison. I didn't tell him about the video yet. I wanted to see what he had found on his own. He looked tired and discouraged. "Rosie, I've hit a wall," he admitted, gesturing to a small stack of papers on his desk. I checked on the witnesses listed on the new will. The first is a nurse named Donna Evans. She worked for a temporary agency the hospital used. Her record is clean, but she left her job the day after your father passed away. The agency said she moved out of state, and they have no forwarding address. The second witness is a hospital orderly, Mark Jennings. He still works there. I spoke to him, and he was very nervous. He confirmed he saw your father sign a document, but his story was rehearsed. He kept repeating the phrase, "Mr. Miller was lucid and clear-headed." It sounded like something he'd been told to say. This was exactly the kind of dead end Brenda had probably counted on. One witness gone, the other coached. "Mr. Harrison," I said, leaning forward, "I need you to do a few things for me, and I need you to trust me. First, can you get me the official visitor logs for my father's hospital room for the entire last month of his life? I also want security camera footage from the hallway outside his room, specifically for the date the new will was allegedly signed." He raised an eyebrow. "That might be difficult to obtain without a court order." "Then file whatever you need to file," I said, my voice steady. "Tell them you suspect undue influence. We need that evidence." My second stop was the bank. My father had given me power of attorney years ago, and while I knew it had become void upon his death, I still had records of all our shared accounts. I spent hours poring over statements, tracing every transaction my father and Brenda had made in the past year. Most of it was normal: bills, groceries, travel expenses. But then I found it. 3 weeks before my dad died, there was a large cash withdrawal from their joint savings account made by Brenda. $20,000. It was a huge red flag. Why would she need that much cash when all of my father's extensive medical bills were being covered by his insurance? The final piece of the puzzle was the will itself. I took a high-resolution photo of the signature page and sent it to a forensic document examiner Mr. Harrison had recommended. The initial consultation was over the phone. "It's a very competent forgery," the examiner, a woman named Dr. Albright, told me after studying the image. "The forger clearly had access to numerous examples of your father's signature. However, a signature is a muscular action, a habit. A forgery is a drawing. It often lacks the natural rhythm and pressure variations of a genuine signature. I see signs of that here: unnatural pauses, consistent pen pressure where it should vary. But to be certain, I'll need the original document and more samples of your father's authentic signature." Armed with this information, I went back to Liam. We sat in his apartment, which looked more like a command center, with multiple monitors displaying spreadsheets and timelines. I laid out what I had found: a missing witness, a coached witness, a suspicious cash withdrawal, and a likely forgery. "Okay," Liam said, typing furiously. "Let's find your missing nurse." He cracked his knuckles, a grin spreading across his face. "Brenda thinks she can hide people in the digital age? Big mistake." For the next 2 days, Liam worked his magic. He dug through social media, public records, and data broker sites. He was a digital bloodhound on a scent. He found Donna Evans's online footprint. She had been careful, deleting her main social media accounts, but she'd missed a few things: a public comment on a local news page, a tagged photo from a friend's wedding. Cross-referencing this with property records, he found her. She hadn't moved across the country. She de-moved 30 miles away to a new apartment complex. An apartment complex that had just been built. And then came the final connection, the one that made my blood run cold. Liam pulled up the property records for the new development. The developer was a subsidiary of a major construction firm. A firm that, until 2 years ago, had a senior partner on its board. That partner was Brenda's ex-husband. "She didn't just pay them off, Rosie," Liam said, his voice grim. "She laundered the money through a network she already had. The $20,000 from your dad's account was likely a down payment, a finder's fee for 2 people willing to lie. We had it. We had the money trail, the questionable witnesses, and the expert opinion on the forgery. And waiting in the wings, we had the star witness himself, my father on video, ready to deliver his final testimony. Brenda had built her case on lies and deceit, a poorly constructed facade, and I had just found all the structural weaknesses. Now it was time to bring the whole thing down. With all the evidence in hand, the next step was to build our case. This wasn't just about challenging a will anymore, it was about proving fraud, a serious criminal offense. My meeting with Mr. Harrison was a world away from our last one. I walked in with Liam, carrying a laptop and a binder thick with documents. I laid it all out for him, step by step. I started with the bank statements showing Brenda's suspicious cash withdrawal. Then, I presented Liam's research, which traced the connections between Brenda, her ex-husband's company, and the conveniently disappearing nurse. I showed him the hospital visitor logs we'd finally obtained, which showed Donna Evans and Mark Jennings entering my father's room together on the day the will was signed, staying for only 7 minutes. Finally, I opened the laptop. "And now," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I want you to hear from my father." I played the video. Mr. Harrison, a man I'd known my whole life as a pillar of calm professionalism, watched with tears welling in his eyes. He took off his glasses and wiped them, his hand shaking slightly. When the video finished, he was silent for a full minute, staring at the screen where my father's determined face had been. "In 40 years of practicing law," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion, "I have never seen anything like this. This isn't just evidence, Rosie. It's a message, a directive from George himself." His demeanor shifted. The grief in his eyes was replaced by a lawyer's steely resolve. "This changes everything. We are no longer just contesting a will in probate court. We are going on the offensive." Our plan was multi-pronged. First, Mr. Harrison would file an emergency motion to suspend Brenda's executorship and freeze all of my father's assets, citing evidence of fraud and undue influence. The centerpiece of this motion would be an affidavit from me describing the discovery of the video. We would hold the video itself back, saving it for maximum impact. Second, he would contact the district attorney's office. Forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder exploitation were criminal matters. We would hand over our entire investigation, the financial records, Liam's digital forensics, and Dr. Albright's preliminary forgery analysis, to the authorities. Third, and this was my idea, we needed to handle Brenda directly. A formal legal proceeding could take months, even years. I couldn't bear the thought of her living in my father's house, selling off his belongings for another day. I wanted her to know that we knew. I wanted to see her face when her perfect crime unraveled. We decided to arrange a settlement meeting. Mr. Harrison would invite Brenda and her lawyer to his office under the pretense of discussing a potential compromise to avoid a lengthy court battle. I knew Brenda's greed would make her attend. She would assume I was coming to beg for scraps, and she would relish the opportunity to deny me. The day before the meeting, Liam and I made one more trip to the hospital. We didn't go to see the nervous orderly, Mark Jennings. We went to see his supervisor. We presented a carefully curated version of our findings, implying that a serious legal investigation was underway regarding fraudulent activities involving hospital staff. We mentioned that we had video evidence of my father's true wishes and that anyone found to have been complicit would face severe consequences. We didn't threaten, we simply laid out the facts. We suggested that it would be in the hospital's best interest, and Mr. Jennings's, if he were to come forward with the truth. We left Mr. Harrison's card and walked away. It was a calculated risk, but we were betting that Mark's loyalty to Brenda was not worth his job and a potential criminal record. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by the boxes containing my father's legacy. For weeks, I had felt powerless, adrift in a sea of grief and betrayal. Now, I had a blueprint. I had a plan. My father had spent his life building things that were meant to last. Brenda had tried to demolish his most important structure, his family and his word. She had used a cheap forgery, a document with no foundation. I, on the other hand, had built my case with the same care and precision he would have used. Every piece of evidence was a load-bearing beam. Every fact was a steel reinforcement. The next day, at the meeting, I wasn't just going to show Brenda the cracks in her story. I was going to subject it to a stress test it could not possibly withstand. The demolition was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp. The atmosphere in Mr. Harrison's conference room was thick with tension. I sat on one side of the long, polished table with Mr. Harrison and Liam. Brenda sat opposite us, next to her lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit who looked dismissive and smug. Brenda herself looked triumphant, radiating a condescending pity in my direction. She clearly believed this was her victory lap. Her lawyer began. "Let's make this brief," he said, steepling his fingers. "My client, Ms. Miller, is the sole beneficiary and executor of her late husband's estate, as per his final, legally binding will. While she is sympathetic to Ms. Miller's disappointment, he said my name with a slight sneer, the will is ironclad. We are prepared to offer a small, one-time settlement of $10,000 out of respect for her relationship with her father, provided she agrees to waive all future claims against the estate. I almost laughed. $10,000 to walk away from my home, my inheritance, and my father's truth. I looked directly at Brenda. No, I said calmly. I think you misunderstand why we're here. We're not here to ask for a settlement, we're here to offer you one. Brenda's smile faltered. Her lawyer scoffed. On what grounds? Your feelings? The probate court deals in facts and documents, and we have the only one that matters. Mr. Harrison slid a single-file folder across the table. We believe the document you have filed with the court is a forgery. That's a baseless and defamatory accusation. Brenda's lawyer snapped, his composure cracking for the first time. Is it? Mr. Harrison countered, his voice like ice. Inside that folder, you will find a preliminary report from a forensic document examiner. You will also find bank statements showing your client withdrawing $20,000 in cash 3 weeks before George's death. Furthermore, you'll see evidence showing that one of the supposed witnesses to the will, Donna Evans, has ties to your client's ex-husband and received a significant financial benefit shortly after George's passing. Brenda's face had gone pale. Her lawyer opened the folder and his eyes widened as he scanned the documents. His smug demeanor evaporated, replaced by a flicker of panic. This is circumstantial, he stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. It gets worse, I said, taking over. The other witness, Mark Jennings, has already given a formal statement to his superiors at the hospital. He has confessed that Brenda paid him $5,000 to sign the document. He admitted. He never saw my father sign it. In fact, he now states that my father was asleep the entire time he was in the room. Brenda shot to her feet. He's lying, they're all lies. Sit down, Brenda, her lawyer hissed, pulling on her arm. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense register. But we don't have to rely on Mark's word, do we? The thing about my father is that he was a meticulous man. He always had a contingency plan. He knew you were pressuring him, Brenda. He knew you would try something like this. And so he made sure his final wishes would be heard, in his own words. Liam turned a large monitor on the credenza behind us to face them. I clicked a key on the laptop in front of me. My father's face filled the screen, pale, weak, but utterly resolute. Rosie, his voice filled the silent room. If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone, and it probably means that Brenda has tried to pull something. Brenda made a choked sound, like she'd been punched in the gut. She stared at the screen, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. We played the entire video. Every word echoed in the conference room, a damning indictment from beyond the grave. When he got to the part about her trying to force him to sign a new will, she let out a sob and sank into her chair, covering her face with her hands. The video ended. Silence. Her lawyer looked utterly defeated. He closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. He knew the game was over. Mr. Harrison spoke, his voice ringing with finality. Here is our offer. Brenda will immediately sign a confession of forgery and a document relinquishing all claims to the estate of George Miller. She will vacate the house within 24 hours. In return, we will present this confession to the district attorney and recommend leniency. If she refuses, we will walk out of this room, and this video, along with all the other evidence and witness testimony, will be in the hands of the authorities within the hour. She won't just lose the estate, she will face a grand jury. The choice is hers. Brenda didn't even look at her lawyer. Through her sobs, she just nodded, unable to speak. The slick lawyer, now looking like a man desperate to distance himself from a toxic client, quickly drew up the necessary documents. Brenda signed them with a shaky hand, her signature a pathetic scrawl compared to the one she had tried to forge. As she stumbled out of the room, a broken woman, I didn't feel the rush of triumph I had expected. I just felt a profound sense of relief and a deep, aching sadness. It was over. My father's final presentation was complete. He had built his case perfectly, and justice, like one of his bridges, had held firm. Walking back into my father's house the next day was a surreal experience. Brenda was gone. All that was left of her were a few faint perfume traces in the air and some ugly decorative pillows on the sofa. The house felt quiet, like it was breathing a sigh of relief. It felt like home again. The legal fallout was swift. Brenda, true to her nature, tried to flee. But with the evidence we had, the DA had already put a tail on her. She was apprehended at the airport trying to board a flight to a country with no extradition treaty. Faced with overwhelming evidence and her own signed confession, she took a plea bargain. She was convicted of forgery and fraud and sentenced to 3 years in prison, with a hefty fine and an order to pay back the $20,000 she had stolen. The nurse, Donna Evans, was also charged as an accomplice. Mark Jennings, for his cooperation, received probation. Justice wasn't just symbolic, it was real and tangible. With the fraudulent will nullified, my father's original, true will was executed by Mr. Harrison. The house was mine. His legacy was secure. The first thing I did was hire a painter to cover up all of Brenda's garish color choices, returning the walls to the warm, comforting tones my father had loved. With Liam's help, I carefully unpacked my father's office, putting every book, every model, and every blueprint back in its rightful place. It was no longer a room of ghosts and grief. It was a sanctuary of memory and love. The months that followed were about rebuilding, both literally and figuratively. I used some of the inheritance my father left me to establish a scholarship in his name at his old university's engineering school, the George Miller Memorial Scholarship for Structural Integrity. It felt like the most fitting tribute to a man who valued strength, fairness, and building things that last. Every year, I receive letters from the students who have been helped by his legacy, and it feels like he is still here, still supporting the next generation. My work as an architectural historian took on a new meaning. I became even more passionate about preservation, about fighting to save the stories held within old walls. My father's last message had taught me that our legacies lay not just written in stone and steel, but in the truth we leave behind for others to find. Life settled into a new normal. Liam and I are closer than ever. Going through that fire together forged our bond into something unbreakable. We often have dinner at my dad's old dining table, and I know he would be happy to see the house filled with laughter and friendship again. I still have the tablet. I don't watch the video often, but sometimes, on a quiet night when I'm missing him, I'll play it. I no longer feel the anger or the betrayal, just an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. He knew me so well. He knew I had the strength to see it through. He left me a blueprint, not just to win a legal battle, but to rebuild my life on the foundation he gave me. His house stands strong, a testament to his craftsmanship. His scholarship helps young minds build the future. His memory lives on, not as a victim of a terrible betrayal, but as a brilliant, loving father who had the last word. He ensured his legacy was not defined by Brenda's greed, but by his own enduring integrity. And for that, I will be forever grateful.